like to introduce some of our guests today. From the town of Danvers, former town manager Bob Curtis, sitting at the table right there. Town administrator and a new assistant administrator, Ira Singer and Brian Ferreira. We have Judge Thaddeus Butchko with us. Here. We have Melissa Gaspar from the Flint Public Library, director. Trying to see if I see anybody else that I missed. Oh, our distinguished guest from the American Legion, Steve Collins, the commander of Post 227. And the president of the Ladies Auxiliary, Pauline Kaloji. And of course, Lois LeMay, Council on Aging and American Legion Auxiliary. We got Bob Wall and Bruce Hersey from our post as well. And Dot Ferrara from the Auxiliary as well. And of course, Susan Gannon, Director of Council on Aging, and myself, Ted Butler, the Director of Veteran Service. Can I get somebody to shut the music off, whoever has charge of that? Okay, before we have lunch, it's a tradition in the military services of the United States that we seat an honored guest. As you entered the hall, you may have noticed a small table at the front. It is reserved to honor our missing comrades in arms. They are commonly called prisoners of war or missing in action, POWs or MIA. We call them brothers. They are unable to be with us today, and so we remember them in this special way. I'd like to explain the meaning of the items on the table. The table is set for one, symbolizing the frailty of one. One prisoner alone against his oppressors. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their motives when answering the call to duty. The single red rose displayed in a vase reminds us of the life of each of the missing and the friends and families who kept the faith, awaiting answers. The vase is tied with a red ribbon, symbol of our continued determination to account for our missing. The candle is lit, symbolizing the upward reach of their unconquerable spirit. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of the bitter fate of those captured and missing in a foreign land. A pinch of salt symbolizes the tears endured by those missing and their families as they wait. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us. The chair is empty. They are not here. All of you who served with them and called them comrades, who depended on their might and their aid and relied upon them, remember, for surely they have not forsaken you. And now let us stand in silence to honor America's POWs, MIAs, and to the success of our efforts to account for them until the day they come home. Remember. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we ask your blessing for the bounty we are about to receive. Bless this food to our use and us to thy service. We ask you to bless and comfort those who are suffering illnesses, disabilities, and mental strife. Cheer them and bring them blessings of health and happiness. Bless the friends gathered here today and guide them in their daily lives. We pray that our nation would learn to respect and acknowledge those who have served their country well. May you guide, bless, and protect all those engaged in our present military actions. Heal the physical and spiritual wounds that may be inflicted, and bring peace to those who mourn the loss of our fellow veterans. Bless also those departed veterans and their relatives who are unable to be with us this day. We also pray that you continue to bless America and guide us in the cause of justice, liberty, and peace. Amen. Amen. You may be seated.
Close family, we all live on the same street.
Wow. Thank you very much. I'd like to say thanks to each and every one of you folks for coming here today for this very important testimonial. And at this time, I'll hand it over to a very dear friend of mine who is a colonel, retired colonel from 94th Army Reserve Command, and was a retired Chief Justice of the Essex Probate Court. His Honor, Thaddeus Butchico. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation to be present with all of you here today. And our guest of honor, Bernard Clark here, a distinguished guest of honor who has an unusual exciting background there for his participation to serve this nation, our democracy, in World War II. He was one of the individuals who suffered a tremendous amount of pain, anxiety, dedication, and sincerity in carrying out his military duties during World War II. He was in the Death March in Bataan, and he served in Corregidor. And if you read some of the military history, many of the prisoners from that Bataan Death March were placed on ships, the Japanese ships, to take them as slave laborers in Japan. And many of the ships were actually strapped and sunk by the Americans, not knowing that there were Americans aboard some of those ships. So he has gone through a heck of a lot, and he really sets an example for the rest of us who have served in the military. And we do have many of the veterans agents who are here, other local officials from not only from Middleton but surrounding communities. I say to all of you who have served our country, thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts for your service. I had a little brief experience in World War II. I didn't realize it till, after the war, many, many years after the war. I served on a destroyer in the North Pacific, and we participated in 8 sea strikes. And the destroyer, the USS Bears, was requested to act as the head of the convoy that was going in for the occupation of Japan. And we had a separate, not a surrender ceremony, but it was occupation order number 1 in the Pacific. Right after September 2nd, this took place on September 10th. And we had a rendezvous with 2 Japanese vessels, and we had to transport the Japanese emissaries from the Japanese vessel to the USS Concord, which is really the Concord named after the town of Concord, Massachusetts here. It was a cruiser, and that cruiser, we found a sweep in the Sea of Okhotsk, which is northern part of Japan, and close to Kamchatka Peninsula. And after that sweep in the Sea of Okhotsk, we performed a bombardment of some of the islands, the Kuril Islands. And it was on August 14th, 1945. And I recall distinctly, because I was topside at that time, after ceasefire was given, there was a round went off. I thought possibly the Japanese were coming back and were probably to try to sink our ships. But actually, many years later, I found out that that shot that I heard supposedly was the last naval shot fired in World War II. The Concord, the forward bound of the ship, they returned back to the Boston Navy Yard, and at the Boston Navy Yard, that gun mount was taken off and sent down to Washington, D.C. area, and it's now supposedly part of the naval history because of its participation. And it was ascertained that in reality, it was the last naval shot fired in World War II, official shot fired in World War II, and the USS Concord was given the credit for it. But at the surrender ceremony, we refer to it sometimes as a surrender ceremony, but it was actually a ceremony pursuant to Occupation Order Number 1. And here again, it was only 19 years at the end of the war. And we were given too much information. You're just listed, seamen aboard ship. And most of the officers were not aware of it. But that particular incident, the surrender ceremony, I received a copy of it many, many years later. A young man who had a little hamburger place on Salem Square from Ipswich, Massachusetts. He knew that I was in the Navy, and he said, we used to tie up right alongside you. And I said, what was the name of the ship? He was on a communication ship, the USS Panamint. And Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher selected the USS Panamint to be his sort of command headquarters for this particular ceremony. And he said, did you ever receive a copy of these particular surrender ceremonies there at the Occupation Order Number 1? I said, I never knew such a thing existed. This is many, many years after World War II. And he said, I'll make a photostatic copy of it for you. And it was interesting reading because one of the items in that Occupation Order Number 1 referred to the prisoner of war camps throughout Japan. And the Japanese were ordered to give accurate descriptions not only of the location of these prisoner of war camps, so American prisoners, but they wanted the names, their serial numbers, and all the information they had of each prisoner, the status of health of each of the prisoners there, and their location. And they were ordered to turn those over to the United States forces as soon as possible. And so possibly you may have been in one of those camps possibly that were referred to in that particular surrender ceremony there that took place. The surrender ceremony applied to the northern part of Honshu and all of Hokkaido. We then went ahead and occupied the northern tip of Honshu. There's the Ominato Naval Guard District, and we had a little ceremony there, also American flag raising ceremony at the Ominato Naval Guard District. So there were many, many prisoners, American prisoners, who suffered untold hardships over the years, those years during World War II, in those prisoner of war camps, where they performed very, very difficult, and laborious tasks for the Japanese, working in mines and all of the difficult jobs that nobody else could perform. They were ordered to perform those particular tasks. So we commend you for your spirit, your dedication, and your hard work and your perseverance in the face of all sorts of hardships. Congratulations to you and to all of the veterans who are present here today, to honor you for your steadfast devotion to your country. Thank you very much.
Judge Butchko is also a member of this post, American Legion Post 227, and a member for at least 65, maybe even more years, right?
A few years, yes.
A few years. At this time, we'd like to make some presentations to our honored guests. And we have citations from the town of Middleton, signed by members of the Board of Selectmen. And we also have citations from the State House of Representatives. Representative Brad Jones is here, and Representative Brad Hill couldn't make it, but in his place, Representative Ted Spiliotis is here. And so I'd like to ask that these gentlemen please come up and help present these citations to our honored guests here.
Citations of veterans who volunteer.
Yeah, and Brian too. Now, some of these people aren't here, so. Actually, start, I call the name and take the citation from there, and have yours ready too. Okay? Actually, I guess mine is first. Here we go. There you go. I'll let you read it since.
I'll read the one from the town of Middleton, and first say what a privilege it is for me to be here today, along with my new colleague from Precinct 2 in Middleton, Ted Spiliotis. And that we, in the light of the election, I think know full well and appreciate full well the service and sacrifice that you all have made so that we can participate in that grand experiment called democracy. And to think how many over the years have served and sacrificed individually as well as their families so that we can partake in a peaceful transition or continuance of government. And what a truly a gift that has been to us from our founding fathers and preserved and protected and expanded by so many generations and so much service and sacrifice over the years in the history of our country. And in the recognition for Ted Butler here, in recognition of your military service in the U.S. Navy from 1963 to 1966, in your years of dedicated volunteer service to the youth of Middleton as a Cub Scout leader, Boy Scout leader, Middleton Athletic Association president, as well as your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Masconomet School Committee, Flint Public Library trustee, Memorial Day Committee, Town Common Committee, and Director of Veteran Services, and I'm sure many, many other things, and there's not enough room on here for all of them. The members of the Board of Selectmen hereby order that our congratulations and acknowledgement be extended and further ordered and direct while duly assembled in a session at the Selectmen's meeting in Middleton under the Charter and ordinance of the Town of Middleton, that this official expression of pride be sent forthwith on behalf of the Board of Selectmen and citizens of the Town of Middleton, and it's signed by all members of the Board, and on behalf of the House of Representatives, signed by Brad Hill and myself, as well as Representative Spiliotis, in recognition of your military service in the U.S. Navy from 1963 to 1966 and your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton. Congratulations, and we look forward to all your service in the next 60 years.
Okay, the next one that we have here is congratulations to John Red Caulfield. Recognition of your military service in the United States Navy from 1951 to 1954, and your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the zoning board of, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Personnel Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, Charter Commission, and Recreation Committee. And you served in the United States Air Force from 1954 to 58. Congratulations.
We'll take turns. Okay. This is a military process.
Okay, the next one that's here today is Congratulations to George Demerit. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1954 to 1956, and your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Masconomet School Committee, the Board of Health, and the Police Station Building Committee. The next person, Ron Draper. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1966 to 1970, and the years of dedicated service to the youth of Middleton as a Cub Scout and Boy Scout leader, as well as your years of dedicated service, volunteer service, to the town of Middleton as a member of the Finance Committee, Memorial Day Committee, Middleton Emergency Management, Howe Manning Playground Committee, Cable TV Committee, Town Computer Committee, Computer Technical Support, and the first Pumpkin Festival Committee. Frank Fitzgerald. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1953 to 1955, and your years of dedicated service to the youth of Middleton as superintendent of schools, as well as your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Howe Manning Elementary School Building Committee, Insurance Advisory Committee, Municipal Tax Relief Committee, Cable TV Committee, Town Sidewalk Committee, Town Employee Benefits Handbook, and Town Vehicle Use Manual Committee, and the Council on Aging Van Driver. John Goodwin. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1954 to 1956, and your years of dedicated service to the youth of Middleton as a Cub Scout and Boy Scout leader, as well as your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Planning Board, Board of Health, Council on Aging, Board of Directors, Planning Committee for the Vocational School, School Committee for the Vocational School, and Town Numbering Committee. Bill Mugford. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1955 to 1958, and your years of service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Department of Public Works, and dedicated volunteer service as a call firefighter, member of the Board of Selectmen, Zoning Board of Appeals, Industrial Development Commission, Recreation Commission, Historical Commission, Ipswich River Watershed Commission, and Police Commissioner, and a 40-year member of the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary. Bob Murphy. In recognition of your military service in the United States Air Force from 1954 to 1958, and your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Elementary School Building Committee, the Master Plan Committee, the Insurance Advisory Board, the Industrial Development Board, Recreation Commission, and Custodian of Town Lands. Bob Porteous.
Surprise.
In recognition of your military service in the United States Navy from 1946 to 1948, and your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton for 22 years on the Finance Committee, with several as chairman, the Computer Study Committee, the School Building Committees, and many hiring screening committees, as well as the Memorial Hall Renovations Committee. And finally, congratulations to Bernard Pothier. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1940 to 1946, where you served in the Asiatic Pacific Theater of Operations for 4 years and 10 months of 1940 to 1945 with the Headquarters Squadron 24th Pursuit Group. You operated ground transmitting and receiving equipment, sent and received messages using letters and numerals of code, and also by voice. You spent 40 months, 3 years, 4 months as a prisoner of war of the Japanese, surviving the Bataan Death March, and working in the coal mines of Japan. While a prisoner of war, you spent 2.5 years in the Philippine Islands and the remainder 10 months in Japan. Congratulations. Tough act to follow, but Mike Sliney, if you'd come forward. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1971 to 1973, your years of dedicated service to the youth of Middleton as a Cub Scout and Boy Scout leader, as well as your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Conservation Commission. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1955 to 1957, and your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Conservation Commission, Board of Selectmen, Town Moderator, Zoning Board of Appeals, Planning Board, Willow Meadow School Building Committee, 250th Anniversary of Middleton Committee, Capital Outlay Planning Committee, and Transfer Station Solid Waste Committee. And Paul Woodbury, in recognition of your military service in the United States Navy from 1964 to 1970, and your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Elementary School Committee. We had several others that did not make it, but we will present their citations to them at a later date.
Ted, do you want to at least say their names?
Yes, I can do that. The other honorees who are not in attendance, Leopold Blaze served in the military in the United States Army from 1942 to 46. John Carrington served in the Navy from 51 to 54. Bill Clow served in the Navy from 65 to 69. Peter Francis served in the U.S. Air Force from 1968 to 72. Frank Leary served in the U.S. Army from 1958 to 1960. David T. Leary, Jr., U.S. Air Force from 1988 to 1992. Ward Pike Messenger from the United States Navy from 1957 to 63. And Arthur Page, U.S. Army from 1942 to 45. And William Walzak, United States Marine Corps, 1952 to 1955. They could not be with us today for various reasons. Did I miss one?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Bob Kelly, I'm sorry. My apologies. Come on up.
There you go.
Good thing Rita's paying attention.
That's right. In recognition of your military service in the United States Army from 1946 to 1947, and your years of dedicated volunteer service to the town of Middleton as a member of the Historical Commission, Town Common Committee, Planning Board, Finance Committee, Zoning Board of Appeals, Transfer Station Solid Waste Committee, Charter Review Committee, and the First Earth Day Committee. Okay, in order to cut this short, is there anybody that needs to say anything else? Ira?
That won't cut it too short.
Okay. Gotta get through the other term.
I will, but I just want to say I'm humbled to be here. I'm honored to be here. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, they all wanted to be here. They have business obligations, but I can tell you that the ladies and gentlemen of this room have built this town. Not only did you give your service to your country, which is incredibly impressive. I'm proud to be the son of a World War II veteran. My father served in Africa for 3 years. I know that the difficulties that all of those families had and to maintain a family life after that. And I'm here because I think, as with all of the returning World War II vets, my father returned home, started his family, and that's what America was built upon. And you built America and you built Middleton. And I think that if you look at the individual service of all of you, and I've had the honor of working with almost every single one of you, and it is really incredible to me, but it's no surprise, really, that all of you served your country first, and then you served your community, and you're still serving us. So, Mr. Pothier, in recognition of your outstanding service as a prisoner of war leading this effort, now a Middleton resident, I'm happy to say, for 9 years in Ironwood, we welcome you here, and you can see that you've come into a wonderful town. I want to congratulate all of you, Ted Butler especially, Susan Gannon, Bill Mudford, Judge Bushko, many of the folks in this room who are always here, the veterans and the folks that really support this town in the way that it deserves. Thank you, and I'm very honored to be a part of this ceremony.
In closing, I'd like to thank the following individuals who contributed to make this luncheon possible. Susan Gannon and the Council on Aging staff, all of them who put this whole thing together here. Members of the American Legion and Auxiliary, thanks for helping. Bill Mudford and Susan Moore for the idea to have this luncheon, which we hadn't had since 2004. And our representatives, Brad Jones and Ted Spiliotis and their staff. And thanks to Paul Paliselli for reporting this luncheon on cable. If there's anybody else that I forgot.
Paul Woodbury.
Who's that?
Paul Woodbury.
Paul Woodbury?
No, they said him.
Thanks, Paul. Anyway, this luncheon is adjourned. Thank you. The readings you would like to do, if we can have everybody's attention.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to just say the cost of freedom is an awful lot for our veterans. I am going to read a reading of a gentleman that I live with down at the elderly housing. He had a son in Iraq, and he was coming home on an airplane while his son was serving. And this is a poem that he wrote while on the airplane. The setting sun, still warm and bright, cast a shadow and shimmering light upon an inscribed bronze plaque set in the ground, bearing a name that's beloved and profound. The air is still, a breeze sails lightly, and fallen leaves lie around scantily. This quiet spot, there is no sound. The stillness surrounds, it is all around. His date of birth, his day of demise, his rank and service are all inscribed. And here rests a fallen comrade, devoured of pain, who gave his life, but not in vain. The cost of freedom lies here alone. The memory of his service is well known. We pay homage, we remember his deeds. So give honor to them for the price they paid. We shall never forget the sacrifices made. Let the drum roll sound softly. Let the mournful strains of taps fade quietly. For they lie so wrapped in God's earth, having paid the price of freedom for all it was worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly, and I'd also like to thank those veterans who came out tonight as well. John and Jane Larrabee, for example, Ann and Bill Reynolds, and Lee DeMore. You're still here. Thank you for coming. In addition, Bob Wall, Bruce Hersey, and all the Legionnaires and members of the auxiliary as well. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you had an enjoyable day. Thank you.